Hello and welcome to today's European SharePoint Office 365 and Azure Community webinar. My name is Shane and I'm delighted to be joined by Raphael Kullner, Executive Consultant BDO Digital, Microsoft Regional Director, Office Apps and Services MVP, Windows Insider MVP, and founder at digitallawyer.de, who will be talking to you today about Microsoft compliance tools and Microsoft Teams. Remember to join the conversation about today's webinar on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @EuropeanSP and our hashtag is ESPC21. Don't forget to check out the Resource Center. This is updated daily with the latest blogs, ebooks, webinars, and how-to videos. Simply visit sharepointeurope.com and click the content link at the top. ESPC21 Online will take place on the 1st and 2nd of June 2021. Be part of this event. Register today online at sharepointeurope.com and attend for free. After the webinar, we will have a questions and answers session. Type any questions you have in the questions window. Questions will be selected and answered at the end of the presentation. This webinar is being recorded and you will be notified by email when it is available. And now I'm going to pass you over to our webinar presenter, Raphael Kullner. Hello, Raphael.
Hello, I hope you can hear me and see me.
Yep, take it away.
In my home office.
Like the rest of us. If you just want to share your screen, Raphael.
Yes, I can start and share my screen. Give me 1 second. And then I see the perfect. Hopefully we see the correct window. Do we see the slides?
Yeah, brilliant. Take it away, Raphael.
Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you very much. At first, thank you very much for the invitation for this webinar and to talk about these, out of my view, very important topics, or a very important topic, compliance tools and Microsoft Teams. And we are 1 week before the Ignite, so we will see some more, and we have a very short preview because some of the navigation points, they will be released next week. We will see today in the Compliance Center. So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you very much. And we have around 60 minutes. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. And also I have some steps into my presentation. So after every topic, I can answer some questions. And also at the end, we have a part with questions. And yeah, the slides, you will get the slide at the end. So everything is fine. So let's start. Microsoft compliance tools and Microsoft Teams. It's an overview of what you can do and how you can configure the main 2 tools and what you can do with the other one. So at first, I talked so much in the beginning. At first, my name is Raphael Kullner. I'm working for BDO as executive consultant. I'm also and I'm leading the compliance center here at BDO in Germany and also working international with BDO Global. I will talk a little bit in the next 20 seconds. I have 2 slides, but at first, I'm also Microsoft Regional Director, one of 110 or 120 people around the world. This is a business connection between people out of the community, out of the business area, and the Microsoft leadership teams to different topics. And also with leadership teams on level on Satya Nadella, Scott Guthrie, and all of these, and PM managers and all of this. Yeah, this is a business area. And on the other side, I'm also Microsoft MVP for Office Apps and Services and Windows Insider MVP. And I like the community, and I like to have these community workshops and sessions and discuss with you about special topics like compliance tools and Teams. I have email address, a blog, and some communities. And yeah, so let's start. And a little bit to BDO. That's the only 2 slides. We are BDO a business unit, so we are working with BDO Digital, BDO Cybersecurity, and Legal together. That's really cool, and we have a very big portfolio with a lot of people behind it. My part is the cybersecurity and also the compliance and IT part with Office 365 and Microsoft Teams. Okay, advertising ends. Let's start with the conference and with the session. I think about it. Okay, when we talk about Microsoft Teams and compliance tools, we can talk around a week about every tool and what the tools can do and which tool is included, which is the best licensing and all of this. So I summarize these weekly workshop to 60 minutes, and we will start with a short introductions. We will talk a little bit about requirements, and then we talk about tools, and we have a Q&A section at the end. And for tools, I have a look at the retention and Microsoft retention and Microsoft sensitivity labeling, and a little bit about e-discovery. So I picked 3 tools out of the portfolio, and we will talk a little bit more about these tools. But at first, let's start with the introduction. What is compliance? That's one of the first questions, and everything asked. Okay, you are leading a compliance department. You are a compliance consultant, an executive consultant for compliance. What are you doing all the day, and what is compliance? And that's really cool. I translated the dictionary one out of 3 different dictionaries to English, and everything is does the correct compliance or compliance with the rules. So what means compliance? Compliance is for me, you are connecting with the rules, you fulfill the requirements, and it's all of the requirements, not only data privacy rules, for example. We fulfill all of the requirements, also to internal requirements. And when we have a little bit deeper look, and I have a look at Wikipedia, we have different compliance sections, and today we will have a look at the compliance in law and also the IT compliance. And IT compliance is what we need to know with Microsoft Teams together, and Microsoft Teams compliance or Microsoft 365 compliance tools in connection with Teams. So IT compliance with behavior rules, laws, and guidelines. And this is what we have to do today and what we have to look at. And at first, let's have a look. Let's have a look back to my slides. Let's have a look into the next slide. When we have a look, for example, what are the requirements? And we have a look here. We have a lot of requirements out. We have special requirements, for example, in Germany. We have special requirements in Europe, especially here GDPR, for example. We have also, for example, requirements in connection with the Brexit. We have HIPAA from USA. We have internal requirements, for example, industry requirements. We have also international certifications like ISO certifications. We have SOX. We have legal requirements from special judgments or from special laws in your countries. So that's very interesting that you have a full set of different requirements you have. And when we summarize these hundreds of compliance guidelines, we need to look at Microsoft and said, okay, all of these requirements, or most of these requirements we need for Microsoft Teams. And when we have a look, for example, at the Trust Center, we can summarize these a little bit for international standards, industry standards, or regional standards. And here you see, for example, in the Security Center and the Trust Center also, you see which are the international requirements, industry requirements, and the regional requirements, for example, for Germany. Also, we have for Netherlands, for France. That's really cool. And if you have a look at it, Microsoft has a lot of certificates, also contract standards like the EU model clauses, for example, and other certificates that they fulfill with Office 365. And the most of them are also fulfilling for Microsoft Teams. So you have a basement of requirements, and you have a basement on the other side of certifications and international and regional standards that Microsoft fulfill. And when we have a look a little bit deeper or a little bit more international, you see here a full list, a bunch list of certificates and requirements that Microsoft fulfill on technical side, also on legal side. And that's very, very interesting. I collected all of these. This is only extraction of it. I collected these, and I have around 1,399. Yeah, my Excel sheet is 1,399 requirements, which I collected around the world, so that we can say, okay, when we deploy Microsoft Teams in Europe, then we have these requirements. These are fulfilled with these certificates, with these default contracts, for example, in the DPA attachment. And on the other side, that's very interesting, that you can fulfill nearly the same requirements also in the other countries. For example, you are working in another tenant, in the tenant of your customer, for example, in India or in Australia, or now also in Canada, for example. That's very interesting that you can fulfill also with a Microsoft baseline of certificates, and yeah, in these countries too. That's very cool. So when we have these baselines and we have these requirements, we have one more requirement, and that's since the pandemic, we are talking about this is a modern workplace. So that's very interesting. We are working at home, like me in this moment, or like you too. You're working at home. We are not traveling so much. Hopefully, after the pandemic, we have to travel. We have ideas. We have to work sometimes around the clock with the different time zones. I'm also working in 3 time zones. So these are also requirements for Microsoft Teams. So with these time zones, we have different laws, also out of different countries, for example, and we have different teams, and we are working more and more. And this is also one of the key situations. We are working also more with internal and external guys. So I have in my team, for example, people that are internal, we have external ones at the customers. We are the external ones, for example, and we have like these, we have the community too. And at the end, we have work results. So this is also very interesting when we have a look at it and see, okay, this is the normal collaboration, and Microsoft Teams is a common collaboration tool itself. And it's very interesting that when we talked about compliance tools, and this is the first learning step, compliance tools working in the first step only in your tenant. So you see here the line, and when we talk about compliance tools, and when we talk about and said, okay, this line, this is my Microsoft team, for example, my Microsoft 365 group, which is teamified, and we are working together with internal and external, we creating work results, and my compliance tools are working in this area, in internal, in these borders, okay. For example, we have also some compliance with like sensitivity labeling. This label is as a metadata will be moving with the file. For example, if you're moving the file outside to the community can't open this file. This is also a little bit special one of the compliance tools, but the basic rule is if you have compliance tools in Microsoft 365, they are working for the whole tenant, and they are working for all what happened in the tenant. And Microsoft is opening this a little bit, for example, with sensitivity labeling. That was my example. And also with Azure Sentinel, if we said that Azure Sentinel is a compliance tool, it's more a security or SOC center tool. But with these tools, you can add to your compliance tools also third-party information, and you can control something which is out of your tenant. There's also one, and hopefully you remember to the last Ignite, and I will open it a little bit. Wait, let me open it so that I can show you my slides, and I hope you see as my slides, my browser, and I hope you see it here. If we go back to the Compliance Center, and there is one more which is announced on last Ignite, where we can add information out of the tenant into the tenant to use compliance tools to control.
Oh, we seem to have lost Raphael, everybody. Just bear with me for a moment. We'll see if we can get Raphael back. Hello, Raphael. Can you hear me? Raphael seems to have gone offline, everybody. I think he probably just has to restart. Raphael, can
Uh,
you hear me?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
you're back. Great. My heart.
I can hear you.
Great. Take it away, Raphael.
You have a question? No, you don't have a question. Okay.
Nope, you
Um,
froze there for about a minute. So,
I was frozen. Ah, okay.
yeah.
Bandwidth in Germany, not the best one. Okay. Um, at summary, we see at first we can say, okay, only compliance tool is working in your tenant, but start beginning and the ignite and the last ignite, we see that with data connectors and all things, we can collect information out of the tenant and bring it into our compliance center, and we have tools like sensitive labeling. When the file is leaving our tenant, we can protect these files. Also, so the time is the time of innovation is running, and I love it that as we can see more and more compliance tools working with external and internal data, and we don't have these border we have to check and control. The same for teamwork on Microsoft. If we have a look here, compliance, security, and also governance, when we put it together in a bucket, these are one of the main target, main points when we talk with Microsoft about Microsoft Teams and about teamwork. And here you see, this is one of my favorite slides too, that we see we have file collaboration, we have knowledge sharing, communication, digital experience, and in all of these areas we have tools. And we have a look in the next slides about these tools in the next slides. And you can remember that, for example, for file sharing and collaboration, we have sensitivity labeling and retention policies, for example. On the other side, we go, for example, for communication and digital experience. Communication, for example, recording of meetings, recording compliance recording options for Microsoft Teams meetings, for example. This is one of these. And we see, for example, with Project Cortex and also with a new trainable classifier, which are available in 6 languages, not only in English. In the future, we see that Microsoft added to the compliance tools also AI functionality, search functionality. So on this slide, you see Microsoft is working a lot of in these areas. So we have these requirements of tools, we have the requirements of working together, we have legal requirements and all of this. And I put at last, at least, one of the requirements together. And this is the typical data privacy one. And you see here, I'm talking to you and said, okay, we have data privacy requirements, we have all of these requirements together. And these are not only for our home country or home state, it's also for an international on international view. And it's very, very interesting that we see, for example, if we have a look only on data privacy, we have a lot of questions and challenges with Microsoft Teams, for example, when we have, for example, multi-geo version of SharePoint in the background with Microsoft Teams in connection. Then we have directly different laws, different data privacy laws, and on the other side, we have, for example, a huge change of requirements out of data privacy because, for example, there's a new one, KKK from Turkey. That's very interesting. It's similar to the Russian data privacy. That, for example, only the personal data of people can be stored and proceed in the country itself. For example, in Turkey. So that's very interesting. That you have to talk about and that you fulfill these different requirements. And Microsoft has a tool or has more tools that you can fulfill the most of it. But Microsoft is only giving you the compliance tools and you have to configure. And at least which are the typical challenges I'm talking about, and you have the requirements, and the requirements often that's okay. For a typical compliance consultant or compliance officer, that's clear we have these requirements. And then we have the challenge how to implement the requirements with Microsoft Teams, what we have to configure. And one of the big discussions, that's because I showed the data privacy one, is a data privacy discussion in Europe. We have national data privacy officers that, okay, Microsoft Teams is not allowed to use because of data privacy and all of these things. So you have to think about, okay, how to configure, what I need to do. And for example, the best one would be, for example, an assessment. And this assessment I will show to you. There's a very new one in the compliance manager. You can book assessments for data privacy and also for other requirements which help you to implement to implement the requirements, to implement the right configuration for your tool. Also, one of the typical challenges is to find the right person in your company. I call it contacts in your company. That's very interesting. For example, you're starting to implement Microsoft Teams and want to say, okay, we implement Microsoft Teams now. I need to configure it as a compliant working solution, compliant modern workplace. And now I need to find, okay, which guy or woman or which person in my company knows which requirements we have to fulfill. Do we have a compliance officer? Do we have a data protection officer where we can find the information? This is one of the main questions I got from my customers. Can you help me? Which people I have to contact and involve in the process? Involve in the process, for example, in Europe, we need working council, data privacy officer. We need for example, HR department, the IT department, and the special departments, for example, about what we have last time, accounting and all of this to fulfill the requirements. This is one of the typical challenges. The organization in the company is a historical way that it's organized in this way. So that's very interesting. Also, the different legal requirements that we see, for example, as an example for data privacy. And one of the main parts are know your data. This is this one, and this is because Microsoft has, for example, accelerators that you can fulfill. You can use auto labeling functionality, retention sensitivity labeling, and you have the data information center. And I give you, for me, the data information center. Let's go back and have a look at it. The data classification. That's for me the data information governance center. And here you see, for example, where are your data, which data do you have, which data is labeled, in which way, what do you have? Do you have sensitivity data? Where, how long is the retention policies for the data? Which is DLP ruled? So you have an overview over your data and your data classification. For me, the compliance center is now data governance and data information center. And it's very cool with Know Your Data. You have the content explorer and also the activity explorer that you can say, okay, I need to know which data I have, where are my data, and when you're starting, for example, before you're starting with sensitivity labeling and retention, and we talked a little bit about today, you see the typical scan of sensitive info types, and here you see, okay, we have some of these data in our SharePoint Online, Exchange Online, OneDrive. You see here most of the data is in SharePoint Online, and now you see, okay, know my data, where is my data, what happened with my data, and for example, also not for example, an example here is SharePoint. There's also Microsoft Teams SharePoint sites included. So I'm asking that we can get Teams here as a location, but Microsoft, okay, everything is included in Microsoft SharePoint, the most of it, and some of the information are in Exchange. And yeah, we will see what happened next week. Maybe we can get a new filter option here. And this is one of the typical challenges we have here and we have to fulfill. That's very interesting. And when we go here and said, okay, when we fulfill all of these requirements, and here's an overview over the requirements, we have to match this with the tools. That's what I do in the last slide. I match the requirement to the tool. So we have a lot of compliance tools here. And when we have a look at these compliance tools, at first we have a little look at the architecture of Microsoft Teams, and then we can match the compliance tools. And that's what I want to do with you now in this moment in the next chapter. Any questions? No. So
none so far, Raphael.
no, so far. That's perfect. So requirements hopefully are clear a little bit what we want to do to match the requirements to the tools. So let's start and talking about tools and Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams, this is an overview slide, and all of you know, okay, Microsoft Teams, we have a Teams client, we have Teams services, intelligent communication clouds in the background with Microsoft 365 core services like SharePoint and Exchange. You know, in the tool before, there's also, we see SharePoint and Exchange also, and we have the Azure platform, also with Azure AD as Microsoft Teams. When we have another look on Microsoft Teams, and I built this slide, the Microsoft 365 groups. So Microsoft Teams is a part of 365 groups. We have the Active Directory and the Active Directory object of the Microsoft Teams group. We have a partner ecosystem with a lot of third-party apps, and we have extended sharings ones, for example, with OneDrive and Forms and all of these tools together. And this is very cool when you have a look. Okay, we have these Office 365 groups, or we have these groups, and when we teamify a group, we added something, and I hope every one of you knows that it's a channel, chat, and phone system. That is a teamifying a unified group, and all of these we need to cover with compliance tools. So we have a bunch of different ones, different categories, different tools, different options here we have to cover. And I can say to you that not everything is covered like we want to have to cover. So if you can go a little bit deeper when we have a look, for example, at the data storage, and then it would be clearer and clearer that, for example, okay, we have sensitivity, labeling, and retention policies. They can be used now for stream recordings because we have OneDrive and SharePoint as a storage. So when we move from the stream to the new, from the Steam storage to the new storage of recordings, we can use more compliance tools now. And we see, for example, also chat messages. They are in the table server Cosmos DB. Cosmos DB is outside of our tenant. Our compliance tools don't working with Cosmos DB. So we are happy that we have a copy of it, of every chat message in the Exchange online storage. So we can use the compliance tools on Exchange and SharePoint and OneDrive, and use these tools to cover the challenge, or to cover the requirements with Microsoft Teams. So at first, when we talk, you need to know a little bit about Microsoft Teams and the architecture. When you know this, and hopefully I have some more slides in my slide deck about it, for example, that what I told you, file storage and also conversations, you can have a look at the end of the webinar. When you get the slides, you can have a deeper look at it. And when you started with these, it's the best entry point, the compliance manager, and the new compliance manager, the best entry point. They said, okay, I know this is Microsoft Teams, I know a little bit about the architecture, and I know the requirements. Then it's a very good entry point to start with the compliance manager. And in the compliance manager, you see, for example, assessments for GDPR. This is not especially for Teams itself. So a lot of these configurations and also assessments you will do is a part of GDPR for Office 365, and Teams is included. So if you configure sensitivity labeling, we see a little bit later, then you configure it not only for SharePoint, you configure it also for Microsoft Teams. So most of the compliance tools you are using are especially not especially for Teams. They are working for Office 365, and Teams is a part of it. That is next learning you have. And nearly to the tools. And no, I don't want to make today with you a contract assessment for Microsoft Teams. That's another topic, and I need another workshop for it. So, but when you have a look at the contracts, you have a look at the Trust Center and also at the audit reports and also at the licensing center, the volume licensing center for Microsoft. And in combination with these portals, you get all of the information you need. For example, also for contracts, for architecture, for security, and also especially for Microsoft Teams. There are a Microsoft security paper. There are some pages about Microsoft Teams, and there are also compliance papers and assessments for different industries, for example, for insurance companies, for finance companies. There are papers which you can use for Microsoft Teams to see, okay, how we can proceed, especially for my industry, for my company, and how I can work with Office 365 more compliant. Okay, we know now the architecture a little bit. We talked a little bit about where you can find the information and more deeply information in connection to compliance and security about Microsoft Teams and Office 365. And now let's start after 20 minutes, 25 minutes. Let's start a little bit and have a deeper look into compliance tools. And when we start directly, and we know the requirements, we know the architecture of Microsoft Teams, and then we start with data protection and governance and with tools overview. And for me, one of the main parts is data protection governance. And we have a lot of data. We have to evaluate, we determine, classify, and entitle. That's what we know with know your data. That's the first step. Then you can say, okay, which tools we can use, for example, to protect and manage the tools. And here we see, okay, we are going to sensitivity labeling, governance, and information governance is mostly retention labeling, retention policy. So we know, okay, that's what we need to do and which tools we can use to do it. Also React and ensure. And then we said, okay, we have, for example, also insider risk management, and we have also supervision options, and we have communication compliance that are really cool that we have a look a little bit later. And if you have the whole slide, we see, okay, and that's what I'm talking in the introduction, we can use all of these tools in our tenant. Some of them are using, you can use also for your local environments when you, for example, want to label files before you move them into the cloud to Microsoft Teams. You can use a unified labeling scanner and label and encrypt the file and then move with the file into Microsoft Teams. And also we have a lot of more connections with ISVs and third-party providers, for example, connection with Adobe, so that you can work with the Adobe standards and use with PDFs also in Microsoft Teams and with the encrypted PDFs too. So that's really cool. And when we have a deeper look and said, okay, now you get 3 overview slides with all of the tools you can use. And you can see here, for example, I put it in 3 buckets: retention and information governance, information protection. So retention, we have retention labels. We will talk a little bit later about it. Then we have information protection, where we have at the main part Azure information protection. Now it called sensitivity labeling. Azure information protection is the old one. So everything is moving to the security center and to the compliance center with unified labeling, auto labeling, Azure Key Vault with hold your own key, bring your own key solutions, and double key solutions. We will have a look when we have a look at information protection. And also we have a DLP and information types you see in the center some minutes before. And at the basement, we have the compliance manager and also trust center and licensing. And when we have a look at cybersecurity, advanced threat protection, I see last week that safe links and safe attachments are GA for Microsoft Teams. A long time it was only in public preview, but now it's GA. I saw a blog post yesterday, so that's really cool. So you can use these also for Microsoft Teams, and it's working in Microsoft Teams. Because it's working before in public preview, but now you have an SLA, so it's compliant now to use in a productive environment. And we have also MCAS, Microsoft Cloud App Security, which is not only cybersecurity, you can use it also for example, sensitivity labeling. You have also some auto labeling functionality. Also, MCAS is a very good tool for creating detailed alerts. Azure Sentinel is for me also one of the compliance tools in the area of security, and we have the Defender, antivirus, and the whole set of these. And also on the other side, that's for me typical security tools. That's, for example, endpoint protection with Intune and MAM, so mobile application management, mobile device management, all of this. And yes, it's possible. You can use Intune and endpoint protection with Microsoft Teams, and you can configure security policies, for example, for the app, and you can configure also with Intune, for example, that Teams is a business app and not a private one. And there's really cool that with the new clients of Microsoft Teams, and some of you have the new client released in the last weeks, you can add a personal account to Microsoft Teams, so you can use Microsoft Teams with both accounts and have a smooth switch between the accounts. And if you, as a company, said, okay, I want this switch and I want that my employees can work with private accounts and also with business accounts, or you want to say, okay, that's not allowed here, you can configure this with endpoint protection and Intune 2. That's really cool. And also MCAS, it's also for me a security tool, also Azure Sentinel. And then we have the Azure AD functionality. We have also, and that we can edit here, for me also as conditional access, that's also working, for example. And then we see Azure AD. It's a very good hint. If you have guests in your Microsoft team, you can configure a conditional access policy that every guest which is moving in your team, which you are adding in a group, for example, in your team, need MFA. So I have for my tenant and also for a lot of tenants, for example, also the Microsoft tenant, if you are switching from your tenant to Microsoft tenant, you have to click on apply, or you have a token and you type in a token, or you get a phone call. So connecting with MFA is a really good one, and it's working with conditional access too. So I would add in this part also conditional access. And then we have also, and this for me, also more security, insider risk, and communication compliance. And this is what I will show you a little bit later in a short demo in some minutes when we have a look at compliance tools. For you, and I don't want to talk a lot of it, I categorized for you the tools in 2 slides. Evaluate, protect, and respond. These are the typical risk process. And I add the tools for you here for Microsoft Teams, which you can use to evaluate: Compliance Manager, Good Entry Point, Service Trust Portal, Cloud App Security, and then Protect with Azure Information Management, sensitivity labeling, and supervision, insider risk, and all of this. And at the end, we have, for example, Office 365 Advanced. And when we have a look more, one of the DPO officers asked me, okay, when we have all of these tools, can you give me a hint which is so before I start to work with Microsoft Teams, which tools I can use when I use Microsoft Teams, and which tools I can use also when I use Microsoft Teams and something happens. So that's very interesting, that you can categorize the tools also, what I have to do definitely before, and also this category, and this is really cool, this slide, you can use it on 2 times, so of starting with Microsoft Teams and also when happened something at Microsoft Teams. So you can say, okay, when something, I want to prevent that I have a compliance issue in Microsoft Teams, what I have to do before, what I have when it's Microsoft Teams is running, and what I can do when something happened in my environment, or I have a request, for example, an employee said, okay, I want to know how you proceed personal data in Microsoft Teams. then you have here the tools that are matching to this category. That was a wish of a data privacy officer. Okay, for this I create this slide and I give it also to you. One more, when we talk about these tools, I'm often get the question, okay, give me a hint, which is the best practice one? Which is the best practice one the people on the companies outside are using? And for me, and I showed here, this is a security or best practice baseline with Intune or endpoint protection with unified, or the same name, sensitivity labeling, with monitoring and security compliance center, with using e-discovery. Hopefully today I would say more advanced e-discovery. So if you want to add Microsoft Teams chats to discovery, you need advanced e-discovery. So yeah, more and more companies add E5 licensing because of advanced e-discovery, or book advanced e-discovery as a single SKU to the security or to the baseline. That's very interesting. And we have data categorization, we have labeling, we have encryption of the files in Microsoft Teams. So we can say, okay, this is the baseline which I see today in a lot of companies, and also in my company, and also in my tenant. This is configured. And when we talk about, for example, regulated companies, for example, in the finance area, in the insurance area, I would say, okay, when we are high regulated, we need to go here and on this side, and we need a security operations center to control it. We need Microsoft MCAS to have a better look into my environment. And also, yes, we need advanced e-discovery and advanced retention or advanced governance tools with a record manager to fulfill all of the requirements and all of the requirements from regulated companies or IT risk infrastructure companies. Then I'm switching more to the best way. So you see an overview about the tools, you see an overview what other companies did in the last time. And now I think for the last minutes, let's have a look into the environment. Let's have a little bit look into the tools. And I will start with retention. And before I switch to into the tool, I will show you the life cycle. And here you see the life cycle of a team. So every time we talk with compliance tools, you need to know what happened. What is the life cycle of a Microsoft team? And you see here we have a new team. The team is active and is running. You have the option to archive a team. Then there's an expiring policy. When nothing happened in the team, it automatically will delete it, soft delete it for 30 days, and then hard delete it. And here you have to think about it. Is the expiring policy the best one? A lot of companies using the expiring policy out of a compliance view. It's not the best one because you have legal requirements to store data for a specific time, retention, to fulfill, for example, legal requirements for the tax office. And so my wish, and I hopefully, and I don't see it next week, but hopefully it will come, that you have a policy that the team will be automatically archived so that you see the information. But what you can do to archive in Microsoft Teams, you can use retention labels. And I will show it in the demo a little bit later. Also, you can use retention policies. Retention policies, for example, from Microsoft one-to-one chats, one-to-end chats, channel messages. Here you need to use retention policies, which you can't use for example, if you have Giphies. And we have also, that's a good translation, we have auto labeling. That's not working. DLP is not working for private channels. So in Microsoft Teams, you need to look, okay, are these compliance tools we have here, and you show in the overview, for example, take this overview, these compliance are working for every single Microsoft Teams? No. I can show you, or I can tell you out of my experience, for example, retention labels and retention policy don't work for Planner. So if you want to work very compliant for example, high regulated companies, you have to think about it to deactivate Planner and use lists for planning or for collecting tasks, because list and every item in list is possible to use retention labels and retention policy to archive or to prevent for deleting. In Planner, it's not working. Everything more, third-party apps, all of the third-party apps don't work. We have also Microsoft apps like Praise. Praise, you don't have compliance tools where you can protect, retent, or store things you post via the Praise app. So we have also applications, the same for, very good one, the new Microsoft Viva, the same. You have no chance with compliance tools to protect or to prevent or to retain information in these special apps today. Hopefully we learn next week more, and we learn more that Microsoft compliance tools working also for these new tools like Microsoft Viva topics and connection, all of this. So at Microsoft Teams, and hopefully you have a deeper look into what is working and what is not working. And when we have a look here, you see this is the retention policy, and here you see there's the Teams chat and Teams channel messages, and then you can store these channel messages very easily. You can set also for special teams, for special users, or only for private channels. Everything is working today. That's really cool. But yeah, not everything is working. So that's why you have to test it. And sometimes I'm testing it every week. So sometimes we have a lot of changes from week to week. For example, some of the additional archiving functionality that will come, and I saw on last week. So that's really cool, and that's what we have to look at Microsoft Teams. And when you have retention in Microsoft Teams, I have a very cool overview. For example, the Microsoft Team retention. When you have a retention policy, for example, 7 years on a Microsoft team, what happened on day 31, so to 30 days after soft delete, the deletion will be proceeded to Microsoft Exchange mailbox, Teams threads also for Planner, and for Microsoft SharePoint, the SharePoint sites and the libraries in Microsoft Teams will be held for 93 days. That's really cool. So if you deleted it, and for example, you have no retention policies, the SharePoint sites are 63 days after the deletion available. You can restore the single SharePoint site. When you put a retention policy on it, what happened? And this is very, very interesting. And that's why I added this slide to the slide deck. Is also when you have a retention policy on it, you can store the channel threads, the chat communication. You can store or prevent for deleting the Exchange mailbox and the group mailbox information, for example, emails which we have in the group mailbox. You can prevent from deletion also the SharePoint side, but for which that's not happen for Planner tasks, everything, and you have a retention policy on the group, the Planner will be deleted after 30 days. So that's what I told you. If you want to use compliance tools, you need the new lists options for tasks, because Planner is not working together with retention policies or retention labels, and Planner don't have, and you know it, don't have a trash, for example. That's what we said, okay, with Planner we have an issue when we talked about compliance tools and Microsoft Team. And I talked so much about it, so let's have a look into the environment. And I have a lot of slides for you about it in the slide deck. So you can use the slide deck as a little bit as a overview, and also as a little book to get the information. So let's start a bit with the demonstration and have a look into the environment. So keep it and open the environment. Okay, we have Microsoft Teams, and okay, we defined retention policies, and I start every time with a record manager. And the record manager, here you have different records, and hopefully there's a new record called regulatory record, and with a regulatory record you fulfill the most of the legal requirements of retention, because with regulatory record you can, and I start with Teams here, you can prevent from deleting a file, from deleting, and also from changing the metadata. That's a really cool one. But when you put a regulatory record on a file, you can't move the file, you can move only the library. And that's a little bit, you have to think about it. If you freeze a file with a regulatory record, you can't move it and you can't change it. So that's very interesting. That's what I configured also here, and what I configured every time. So you have different file plans where you can say, okay, I add retention label and publish them via the label policy to Microsoft Teams, to the SharePoint sites, also to the Exchange mailbox, also to the groups. This on the first side, this is really cool. You can use also the auto labeling one with the auto labeling functionality, and I show it a little. I show it to you. The auto labeling functionality, and the best way is to use the record manager, for example, with the file description. With this file descriptor, this says, for example, you have compliance IDs, you have reference IDs on the files, you have different informations, metadata here, which you are using today. Then you can define a label, a retention label on this file descriptor. That's really cool. For example, for product handbooks and all of this, I used these functionality. And then you have the retention settings, where I use, for example, I have a retention of 6 years period. Out of the law, I define 7 years, because the counting begins at the end of the year. And then you start, okay, when it's created, when it's labeled, when it's last modified. And here you see different event types. That's E5, for example, last modified. And then you can add here also record or regulatory record. And when I add a regulatory record, you see the warning. This will be freezed. And also when you create a regulatory record, you can't delete it in your tenant. And the regulatory record is working then in your tenant. So if I configured all of this, I see in Microsoft Teams, and I start here. I have some documents in Microsoft Teams, and you see here's my retention label, regulatory record retention, for example, label applied by, which is a user applied label. Is a label a record? Here, regulatory record, yes. And I have a sensitivity label for it, and this view is a view of a SharePoint site in the background. So I have to configure the SharePoint site in the background to show the configuration and to show what happened with the file. That is also possible. Which is not possible, to add a retention label in Microsoft Teams. You have to switch to SharePoint, hopefully, and this is one of my wishes. Hopefully on Ignite they will be announced that it's also possible to add a sensitivity and retention label by here, for example, more, and then you see here a button to edit. This is possible today. No, if you want to add a sensitivity label in Microsoft Teams, you have to open the file and add the label. For retention label, you have to switch to the SharePoint site. In the SharePoint site, then you can add a retention label. That's very interesting. It's also very interesting when you synchronize with OneDrive. Sensitivity labeling, yes, it's working, and also retention label is working, because these information will be synced with OneDrive 2 to your desktop. But, and this is not working, retention label, you can't add a retention label to a file in your Windows Explorer. That's only possible in SharePoint today, but sensitivity is working. So if you have a sensitivity label, then this is working also on your Windows, in your Windows Explorer, and you see it here. And if you have a combination of both, retention and sensitivity labeling. This is also working, but, and this is what you need to know, please, at first, put a sensitivity label on a file and then a retention label. Because if you add a regulatory retention label on a file, you can't change the sensitivity label. So if you use records and freeze the file, you need to add everything before you freeze the file, so including sensitivity labeling. Is it possible to make it auto-apply for retention labels? It's very easy. You can add for the library, in the library settings, you can add a default retention label, for example. Then it will be labeled. For sensitivity label, it will come next week, and there will be announced also a PowerShell script that you can add a sensitivity labeling to a library. So this is really easy in the future. But for sensitivity, adding a default label for a library, you need E5. For retention, you need only E3. If you have this, this is the best one, that you have directly a label on the file in Microsoft Teams. You can do it also with auto labeling functionality. We have limits at auto labeling. For example, 20,000 files per day is a limit for retention and sensitivity for auto labeling. And auto labeling needs some time. So when you add a file to a library, there are around 15 minutes to 24 hours. I stopped the time last week that the label will be auto-applied to a file in library, but it's possible, and it's possible, for example, with sensitive information types and with trainable classifier. Trainable classifier is you train trainable classifier based on, for example, 500 builds. You can use both for retention and sensitivity, so that you can use both together. So that's very interesting. So you have retention labels and sensitivity labeling in Teams. It's not working for chat. When we have a look here for the different chats, you can't add a label on a chat or retention label on a chat. So if we want to protect the chat itself, go back, want to protect the chat itself, what do you have to do? What do you think? Go back to information governance, open the solution, and we have to go, I hope you remember, to retention policies. With retention policies, you can define, and it's, for example, here, team chat from Microsoft Teams, you define a retention policy for Microsoft Teams chats and channel messages, and you can extract and include teams and also different chats, different persons, and all of this. And this is the basement of working with compliance tools with Microsoft Teams. And if you said, okay, I want to do a little bit more, and you have the E5 functionality, then we talk about communication compliance and insider risk. I will show you in the last minutes the communication compliance one, because this is the default ones are sensitivity labeling, retention labeling, and also in tune to have to protect of the application itself, to update the application, and also have security informations and giving, for example, the information that the Microsoft Teams is a business application, so that you cannot share private information. That's all fine. What I love is communication compliance. It's E5 functionality based on trainable classifier. And with communication compliance, you see it here, you can monitor offensive language, you can monitor different regulatory compliance, you can create a custom policies, conflict of interest on everything when you're live in your Teams chat. So everything is right, something, or write hate speech, or like this, offensive language, this is a part, or is writing some information which are not compliant out of your view and also are not compliant out of the legal view, then you can define here a rule that it will be forbidden. And you see here, for example, I have some rules to testing, regulatory compliance, and you see here where the rule is matching, on which chat, on which file is matching, and I can decide that's okay or that's not okay. I can decide that's okay for my company, or you see here also who is sending the message. And you see here, yes, also Message Center in Microsoft Azure, the default emails is also matching and locating. So you have to look at it and can decide and train a little bit also this trainable classifier in the background that you can say, okay, you can overview and watch at the communication in your Microsoft 365 10. You see here, emails are included in emails and chat messages. And when we have a look back, here's the chat messages. And when we have a look back, for example, at the architecture overview, you know, yes, the chat message will be stored in the Exchange. So we have a look at the Exchange emails and chat messages included. And you see it here. I can have a look at it and control it. This is really cool for Microsoft Teams chats and Exchange, and also for Yammer. And the last, and then I'm ready and with an overview of the compliance tools and have a look also for the things. We have the last thing is the insider risk management. You can use also insider risk management. You need E5 or the single or package or Microsoft E5 compliance tool. And this is really cool. You can have a look, and that's in German. You can have a look, for example, if an employee said, okay, I will leave the company, you can make a policy like a supervision on these employees and said, okay, what are the employees do? For example, downloading a lot of files out of Microsoft Teams. And that's also one of the really new, the newer compliance functionality, which are working also for Microsoft Teams. And in the last minute, and I add a lot of for you in the slide deck is, and that's what I want to show it to you. The audit logs. Hopefully you all know that's only there are a lot of audit logs from Microsoft Teams, from creating a team to deleting a team, to add new owner in the team, to add a tab and register card and all of this. You can add also alerts. This is also one of the basement configuration. And the last I want to show to you is the e-discovery one. I have a lot of screenshots in my presentation, but I want to show it a little bit, and I want to show it to you. This is Teams chats. And here at first we start a case. This is for legal hold and also for, if you have legal issues, a legal challenge, for example, with one of your employees or with more employees. That's also one you create a case. Then you make a data sources, okay, which are the custodians, which are the data locations you want to search. Then you define a search, and I search, for example, for my client for all chats, and said, okay, let's define the search. Then I have a review set, and the review set, okay, which I want to review. I want to review the chats. I open the review set, and this is only possible with advanced. So if you want to review the chats and want to have a look at the chats, you need the e-discovery advanced functionality. It's working for Teams and also for Yammer communications. Here you see, here's the Teams chat message, for example, and here you can see and store the single Teams message also, and you have a look at it. You can start internal case. You can add text to this message, so you can filter it on a manual way, and also you can download as a PDF this chat message, so that you can, for example, print it out and give it to the legal case. And this is really cool because, and that is the last one, e-discovery is working also for private channels and all of this, and working also for private channels at the beginning. So when we have a look, and that's the end, when we have a look at Microsoft Teams and talking about compliance tools, we have to know that we have a basement of compliance tools, which is sensitivity labeling, retention labeling, audit logs, alerts. You need to implement it and work with it. And then we have special ones like compliance communications, insider risk. You can add to control Microsoft Teams a little bit better. All of this, and the time is running, all of this is a part of the slide deck, and you get all of these information in the slide deck too, and a lot of more information about, For example, here sensitivity labeling. And so that's the end. I hope you learn a lot and you see that see some of the compliance tools, see which compliance tools are available, and hopefully if you want to start with communication compliance and if you have questions or with other compliance tools, come to me and ask. You can use also my community information, or this is my business information, but you can use also my community information. I have a blog, complianceinsider.de, where I describe all of the tools, where I describe the use cases, and I'm working very deeply with the Microsoft engineering team. So if you have any questions to the tools, or if you have any wishes to the tools, please send me an email and say, okay, I'm using, for example, communication compliance, and I want it in my language, and my language is not available. So communication compliance today is available only in English, but if you are recognized in the beginning of the webinar, I told you that is possible in 6 languages at the beginning at next week. So for example, German or France and the Dutch is also possible, but only, so we have 7 languages for communication compliance and trainable classifier. If you have their wishes or on the other tools, send me a link, send me a tweet, or send me an email, and we will find a solution for you and talk with the product group. So thank you very much. Any questions?
Raphael, we're
over.
pretty much out of time, so thank you for sharing your contact details there. If people do have questions, they can contact you directly.
Yep.
Brilliant. Raphael, on behalf of the ESPC community, thank you for taking the time today to complete this webinar. We really appreciate it.
That's a very important topic, and hopefully also you will have a look at compliance tools.
Brilliant. I'll be doing it later. A big mug of cocoa tonight. I'll be in bed reading about compliance tools. Raphael, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Okay,
it's a
everybody.
pleasure.
Thanks, Raphael. Okay, everybody, thank you all for joining us today. That is the end of today's webinar. Please do take care, and goodbye.